at the very beginning of your silence, he's not panicking. In fact, he's comfortable, maybe even a little amused. He assumes this is just a temporary move, a brief withdrawal meant to get his attention. And because he believes you'll come back, he doesn't feel the urgency to do anything. To him, this is a game he's already won. You have to understand that in most cases, when a man has grown accustomed to your presence, your messages, your affection, your emotional investment, he subconsciously registers it as a constant, a given, something that will always be there. And because of that, he doesn't necessarily see your silence as a true threat. Instead, he interprets it as an attempt to make a point, as if you're simply waiting for him to notice and respond accordingly. So what does he do? Nothing. In his mind, your silence isn't yet a challenge. It's an expectation. He thinks, she's just trying to make me miss her. She'll come around. It's the same psychology behind why we tend to value things less when they are always within reach. Predictability breeds complacency. And if up until now you've been the one to check in, to initiate conversations, to keep the connection alive, he sees no reason why this time would be any different. This is where many people make a crucial mistake. They break the silence too soon. They assume that because he isn't reacting, he isn't feeling anything. They misinterpret his inaction as indifference rather than what it actually is, assumption. But here's the key. He's only able to stay in that assumption because there is no evidence to suggest otherwise. If you break your silence and check in, even subtly, you reinforce what he already believed, that you would never really walk away. So in these first few days, he may not even register your absence as a loss. Instead, he might even feel a slight sense of validation, thinking, she's proving how much she cares by staying silent. She wants me to chase her, but I don't need to right now. This is the ego at play. Men, especially those who have been in control of the emotional dynamic, rely on this unspoken power. If he knows he can go hours, days, or even weeks without reaching out and still expect that you'll eventually return, he's not motivated to act. Why? Because there is no real risk. And without risk, there is no urgency. Think about how people respond to deadlines. If you have a project due in a month, chances are you won't feel much pressure to get started right away. But when that deadline starts creeping closer, the anxiety sets in. Suddenly, you're forced into action. The same thing applies here. Right now, in his mind, there is no deadline. There's no real danger of losing you because, as far as he's concerned, history has shown that you always come back. This is why patience is your most powerful tool. Most people struggle with silence because they assume that the absence of a reaction means the absence of impact. But silence is not passive. It's an active shift in energy. It's the withdrawal of something that was once freely given. And it's in that space when someone starts to notice the absence that the real psychological shift begins. But in these early stages, he's still in the comfort zone. He's still coasting on the belief that you will return to him before he ever has to step forward. He's banking on the idea that your emotions will get the best of you, that your need for closure or reassurance will outweigh your commitment to silence. And this is where he's wrong, because the moment you break the predictable cycle, the rules of the game change. The moment he realizes that you are not reacting the way he expected, that you are not showing signs of impatience, frustration, or longing, is the moment his certainty begins to crack. But not yet. For now, he remains confident. He convinces himself that this is temporary. He believes that your emotions will betray you before his ego betrays him, and so he waits. The question is, how long will you? Because that's where the real power is, not in the silence itself, but in your ability to hold it. And here's what's fascinating. When you master this, when you truly embrace detachment, not as a strategy, but as a genuine shift in mindset, you're no longer just waiting for him to notice. You're no longer measuring the days, wondering when he'll realize your absence. Because by the time he does, you may not even care anymore. That is what he never expected. And that is what will truly make him wake up. So if you take nothing else from this, take this. He is not feeling the impact of your silence yet, but he will. The question is not whether he will notice, it's whether by the time he does, you'll still be there to care. At this stage, something subtle yet powerful begins to happen. The initial confidence he had, the certainty that you'd eventually reach out, starts to waver. He doesn't panic yet, but he starts to notice the shift. And more importantly, he starts to feel it. This is where the silence stops being a mere absence and starts becoming a presence of its own. It lingers in his mind. It follows him throughout his day in small, unexpected ways. He picks up his phone out of habit, expecting to see your name. And when it's not there, something feels off. He tells himself it's nothing, but the seed has been planted. It's not just that you're gone, it's that he expected you not to be. And that tiny disruption in expectation is what makes him start to pay attention. You see, human beings are wired to respond to loss more intensely than gain. Psychologists call it loss aversion. The idea that we feel the pain of losing something more deeply than the pleasure of gaining it. Up until now, he never had to consider what losing you would actually feel like. He assumed, consciously or subconsciously, that you would always be an option, a safety net, a presence in the background of his life. But now, there is silence where there used to be reassurance. And it's in that silence that the questions begin. Why hasn't she reached out? How long is she going to do this? Wait, is she really done? At first, he brushes these thoughts aside. He rationalizes, maybe you're just busy. Maybe you're trying to prove a point. Maybe you're waiting for him to make the first move. And because his ego is still in play, he resists acting on these thoughts. He tells himself, I'm fine. This is fine. She'll break before I do. But the difference now is that this is no longer a passing thought. It's becoming a pattern. And patterns are what shift perception. Before, he was in control. He dictated the pace, the tone, the level of engagement. But now, something has flipped. Now, you are the one creating uncertainty. You are the one who is unpredictable. And unpredictability is powerful because it forces the mind to pay attention. Think about it. We only truly notice something when it disrupts the expected. The noise of a city fades into the background because it's constant, but the sudden honk of a car, that jolts us into awareness. The absence of your attention is that honk. And as more time passes, the emotional weight of that absence increases. At first he told himself he was fine, but now he's checking his phone more often. He's scrolling through old messages, maybe even clicking on your profile just to see if there's any sign of you noticing him. And here's where the real shift happens. He realizes he no longer knows where you stand. Up until now, he believed he understood you. He thought he could predict how you'd react, how long you'd last before reaching out. He thought he knew your feelings. But your silence is rewriting everything he assumed. And the thing about uncertainty is that it breeds curiosity. It makes him start to wonder about you in ways he hasn't in a long time. Is she talking to someone else? Has she moved on? Wait, was I wrong about how much she cared? And this right here is where his perception of you begins to change. See, up until this moment, he placed you in a specific category in his mind. Maybe he saw you as the one who cared more, the one who would always be there, the one who was safe. But when you remove yourself from that role, when you create space where there was once certainty, he is forced to reassess. And here's what's fascinating. The more he tries to suppress these thoughts, the stronger they become. Because here's the truth. When someone is truly indifferent, they don't need to remind themselves that they don't care. The fact that he is thinking about your silence at all is proof that it's working, but he won't act on it. Not yet. His ego is still holding on, still resisting, but it's no longer in control the way it once was. Because for the first time, he's not the one making you wait. He's the one waiting. And that is a completely different experience for him. This is why patience is everything. Most people give up at this point because they don't see immediate action, but they fail to realize that the most powerful shifts happen internally before they. Right now, the storm is forming inside his mind, and every moment you remain silent, it grows. So the question isn't, is he thinking about me? It's, how long can I hold my silence and let that thought consume him? Because make no mistake, the moment he realizes he has lost control of this dynamic is the moment he'll feel the need to reclaim it. And that's when the real shift happens. But here's the twist. By the time he does, you might not even care anymore. At this stage, something unexpected begins to take root in his mind. The initial rationalizations, she's just trying to prove a point, or she'll come back like she always does, start to lose their grip. And in their place, doubt. Doubt is an interesting thing because it creeps in slowly, often disguised as logic. He tells himself he's fine, that he doesn't miss you, that he doesn't care as much as you think he does. But then, out of nowhere, a memory surfaces. One he didn't intentionally try to recall. Maybe it's the way you used to laugh at his jokes, the way you touch his arm when you talked, the way your presence felt comfortable in a way he never fully appreciated until now. And this is where the shift happens. See, when you were always available, when your attention was freely given, he never had to examine its value. It was a given, a constant, like air. And the thing about air is we only notice its importance when it's gone. The silence you've created is no longer just an absence. It has become something that presses on him. He wakes up and expects to see a message from you. He reaches for his phone, thinking maybe, just maybe, you've broken first. And when he sees nothing, there's a moment of discomfort, not full panic, not yet, but discomfort. And discomfort is where emotions start to stir. Because here's what's really happening underneath the surface. For the first time, he is experiencing what life feels like without you in it. And it's not the grand, dramatic moments that get to him. It's the small, everyday things. It's realizing he doesn't have that person to share a random thought with. It's noticing that no one is checking in on him the way you used to. It's scrolling through his messages and realizing your name hasn't popped up in days, maybe even weeks. And suddenly the power dynamic shifts, because now instead of feeling like he's the one in control, he's starting to realize he's the one waiting for you to return to the role you once played in his life. But here's the thing. You're not playing that role anymore. And that, more than anything, is what begins to create fear, because up until this point, he operated under the belief that he could always get you back. That no matter how much distance was created, no matter how long you were apart, you would always be an option. But your silence, it's forcing him to face the reality that maybe, just maybe, that's no longer true. And if there's one thing people hate, it's losing an option they thought they would always have. So what does he do? At first he resists. His ego tells him not to give in, not to make the first move, not to break before you do. But the longer your silence stretches on, the more his mind starts to turn against him. He starts wondering, overanalyzing. Has she moved on? Is she talking to someone else? Did she finally realize she deserves better? And it's that last question, the idea that you may have truly let go, that plants the deepest fear. Because if you have, then everything he assumed about his place in your life is wrong. This is the moment where panic begins to set in. Not outwardly, he's still holding on to his pride, but internally the seeds of regret are forming. And this right here is why disappearing is so powerful. Because it's not about making him miss you. It's about making him question what he lost. Anyone can miss a person in a fleeting, nostalgic way, but to question, to look back and think, did I make a mistake? That is what creates a lasting impact. And that impact, it's what makes him realize he can't just assume you'll be there when he finally decides he's ready. But here's where it gets interesting. By the time he reaches this realization, something in you has likely changed too, because the silence that made him question his choices, it also gave you the space to see things more clearly. And this is why so many people, when they finally hear from the person who once took them for granted, find themselves asking, do I even want this anymore? That's the power of detachment. And that's why, when he finally reaches out, it won't be because he just misses you. It'll be because he finally understands what he lost. But by then the real question is, will you still care? At this stage, something inside him begins to shift in a way he didn't anticipate. The initial confidence he had, the certainty that you would eventually cave, that you would reach out first, has started to erode. And what's left in its place? A growing sense of uncertainty. Uncertainty is an uncomfortable emotion, especially for someone who has always felt secure in your presence. He was used to knowing exactly where he stood with you. He knew that no matter what happened, you would always be there, waiting, available, invested. But now there's a new reality forming, one that challenges everything he thought he knew about you. And that's the part that gets to him the most, because it's not just that you're silent, it's that your silence feels different this time. See, there's a difference between someone who is silent to manipulate and someone who is silent because they have genuinely let go. He's starting to sense that your energy is no longer circling around him. And that's what's making him uneasy. He expected you to be distant but still attached. He thought you might ignore his messages but still react to his social media. He assumed that even if you weren't speaking to him, you were still thinking about him. But what happens when he starts to suspect that you're not? That's when his mind becomes his own worst enemy. At first, it's just a passing thought. Has she really moved on? Then it becomes a question he can't shake. Wait, what if she's actually over this? And then the fear creeps in. What if she's already found someone else? This is where the emotional shift happens. Because up until now, his ego was in control. His ego told him that he had time, that you were just trying to prove a point, that eventually you would miss him too much to stay away. But when he begins to question his assumptions, the emotional weight shifts onto him. Now, instead of feeling in control, he starts to feel something he hasn't felt in a long time when it comes to you: powerless. And powerlessness is what triggers regret. Not the kind of regret that comes from missing someone in a temporary, fleeting way, but the deeper kind, the kind that makes a person look back at the moments they took for granted and realize, I had something valuable and I didn't appreciate it. That realization is uncomfortable because it forces him to confront his own choices. It forces him to ask himself, did I push her away? Did I assume too much? Did I let something good slip through my fingers because I thought I had more time? And this is where his actions start to change. You may notice small attempts at regaining your attention, a random text, a reaction to your Instagram story, a comment on something insignificant. But here's the thing, you've changed too, because while he was going through his process of realizing what he lost, you were going through your process of rediscovering what you deserve. And that's why when he finally does reach out, it won't feel the same to you. Before, his attention would have been the validation you were waiting for. But now, his attempt to re-enter your life will feel like an echo of something that no longer holds the same power over you. And that's the moment of true transformation. Because this entire time, he thought he was the one making the decision about when and how you would reconnect. But in reality, the decision was never his to make, it was yours. So when he finally reaches out, not because he's lonely for a moment, but because he has genuinely realized what he lost, you'll have a choice to make. And this time, it won't be about whether or not he is ready. It will be about whether or not you still care. Because when you truly let go, the question stops being about when he will come back, and it starts being about whether you even want him to. At this stage, something unexpected happens. His mind starts to work against him. Up until now, he has been trying to convince himself that he was in control, that this was his choice, that even though you disappeared, it didn't really mean anything. But the longer the silence stretches, the harder it is to keep believing that. Because here's the thing about the human mind. It craves certainty. And when we don't have it, we start filling in the blanks. For him, that means questioning everything he once took for granted about you. He starts to wonder why you haven't reached out. Then he starts to wonder what you're doing. And then inevitably, he starts to wonder who you're doing it with. That's the moment it stops being just about missing you and starts being about something much deeper. Fear. Fear that he miscalculated. Fear that he let go of something he shouldn't have. Fear that you're no longer the person he expected you to be. Because that's the thing, when you pull away, you don't just create space, you create mystery. And mystery is powerful. It forces him to reevaluate everything he assumed about you. Before, he thought he knew you. He thought he could predict how you would react, what you would do, how much you cared. But now you've become unpredictable. And that unpredictability is unsettling, because if he can't predict you, he can't control the situation. And when someone feels like they're losing control, their instinct is to regain it. That's why in this phase, you'll start to see subtle or not so subtle attempts to re-enter your world. He might not come back with a full-blown apology or a grand gesture just yet, but you'll notice little signs that he's testing the waters. Maybe it's a casual text, something that doesn't acknowledge the silence but is meant to break it. Maybe it's a like on an old picture, something small but deliberate, designed to remind you he's still there. Maybe he suddenly shows up in places where he knows you'll be, acting as if it's just a coincidence. Whatever form it takes, the intention is the same, to see if he still holds a place in your life. But here's where things get interesting, because the person he's reaching out to, the version of you he's expecting, isn't the version of you that exists anymore. He's reaching out to the woman who would have been relieved to hear from him, the one who would have taken his breadcrumb of attention and turned it into a full-course meal. But you've evolved past that, because this time, it's not just him who has had time to reflect. You have too. And what you've realized in your silence is that you weren't just waiting for him to reach out. You were waiting to see how you felt without his presence. And now that you've had that space, now that you've lived in that quiet, now that you've seen who you are without constantly trying to keep his attention, you're seeing things differently. You're seeing him differently. Because when you're no longer emotionally dependent on someone's validation, you start to see them for who they really are, rather than who you wanted them to be. And that's why, when he finally does make his move, it won't have the effect he expected. He thought the silence would make you desperate. He never expected that it would make him the one chasing. He thought time apart would make you miss him. He never expected that it would make him question if he ever really deserved you. And this is where you gain the power you never realized you had. Because the choice is no longer about when he decides to come back. It's about whether you even want him back. When you truly detach, when you stop waiting, when you step into your own power and recognize that you are the prize all along, you stop asking, when will he realize what he lost? And you start asking, do I even want him anymore? At this stage, something powerful happens. He realizes he's lost control of the narrative. See, up until now, every reaction he had was based on an assumption. He assumed you would reach out eventually. He assumed you were just waiting for a sign from him. He assumed that even if you were quiet, you were still thinking about him, still waiting in the background, still his, if not in action, then at least in emotion. But now, something shifts. He no longer knows where you stand, and that uncertainty begins to consume him, because what used to be a game of emotional tug of war has suddenly become something entirely different. He was pulling on a rope expecting resistance, but now there's no tension, no pull, just an open space where you used to be. And that's when it hits him. He may have miscalculated, but worse, he may not be able to fix it. This realization doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly. First, there's frustration. He tells himself you're just being stubborn, that you're trying to prove a point. He convinces himself that if he just waits long enough, you'll crack. Then comes doubt. What if she's actually moved on? Then panic. Because if you're no longer affected by his absence, then he's no longer significant in your world. And that's the deepest fear of anyone who has taken someone for granted, the fear of becoming irrelevant. This is when he starts replaying everything, every conversation, every decision, every moment he dismissed you, overlooked you, or assumed you were